Yeah, it's been a little while, and I wanted to make sure I got online because I don't like being offline too long. This channel is dedicated towards you, um, people who are interested in porn addiction and porn addiction recovery, and maybe going through various phases of recovery themselves. Whether you're in a 12-step program and a recovery program and and discuss your porn addiction and porn addiction recovery. If I don't have any people coming on and chatting, which you're free to do, I will just talk about my own topics, and I have plenty of topics to talk about today. So I wanted to first start off with public relation, get on a sex offenders list. In my specific case, I had downloaded a video of a teenage girl. Um, but yeah, it happens, man, and it'll fuck up your life. And you know, I I don't have any um, I don't have any personal um, attraction to like minors or anything like that. It's just the freaking nature of the beast. And so lots of dudes get rolled up in this, man. And shit. I remember seeing Pornhub statistics where they showed that it was for like 6 or 7 years, teen was like the number one search topic on Pornhub. Um, you know, in some states, just you doing that search can get you on a sex offenders list because it's showing intent. I've worked with so many sponsees that have been on the shit end of the stick. Had one guy um, went to jail because he was he was using his phone. He was married at the time. He was a teacher at the time, and he was basically cheating on his wife. He was using one of the cam services to, he was into sex. He would go into strip clubs and stuff like that on weekends. And one of the times, he just picked up a cell phone and was, chatting it up on one of those interactive campsites. It wasn't Pornhub. I don't know what it was, but the girl on the other end was a teenage girl, but he didn't know that, like, he honestly did not know he was signing up for interactive sex experience. So, that got him on the sex offenders list, and he got in as the highest tier because of that. He went in as a tier 3 sex offender. Um, Jesus, dude. The more I think about things like that, the more I consider how lucky I really was, man, because I freaking dodged a big fucking bullet, man. There's You never wanna be on that list. You never want to be on that list. So I'm off of it, and I'm happy. I'm happy that I was able to survive the damn thing. Um, I also wanted to talk about the fact that I have been working a new program. I'm still in SLAA. I have decided to start a PAA group in my local town, and it's working really well. But what I really wanted to address was strategies. Like if you're listening to this right now and you're um, you know going to another 12-step group and maybe you're having to drive a really long way to do it, um, consider starting your own group. It took us about 3 or 4 weeks where we had very limited turnout, and then we finally started getting trickles of people coming in. And what I had to do was, it only takes two people to form a 12-step group. And I chose PAA because I wanted to focus on pornography. I was sick and tired is probably not the best way of describing this. It started to get difficult after a while being an SLAA because the number of porn addicts, it goes in and out. It goes in waves like that. And at its best, I'd had a lot of people inside of the rooms, like maybe 30 or 40% of them that were porn addicts. But when it was at its lowest, I was the only person at its room. And I decided that I was just going to have a porn exclusive group. And part of that was because of COVID, because a lot of people, once COVID hit, a lot of the people who were doing face to face, they didn't have that opportunity of going online. So they could just kind of split. And that's part of the difficulty in this, is that people don't understand that if you have a family, it's hard to get isolated inside of a room and just do a face to face thing online. So it was easier for them to escape and actually go to a place where they didn't have to worry about people listening in and stuff. Um, so yeah, we uh, we started the PAA group, and what I had to do in order to drum up a little business is I reached out to the organization first, and I made sure that they put us on their calendar. And then what I did is I started reaching out to local therapists, local sex addiction therapists, and I was like, "Hey, just want to let you know that this program now exists." That's how word got around. Um, and I also contacted my former probation officer to let her know because she was in contact with a lot of SOs. So we got a good mix of people. And one of the first patterns I've noticed right away was that all of these guys are in their 20s. I had one guy that was about my age, but all the other guys that came in, they're all in their 20s, man. So, it's a small sample size, but I would say it's kind of starting to reflect, I think, what the trend's going to be in the next few years. That, the age bracket for porn addiction is really starting to dial in now. All these, millennials, Ys, Zs, they're growing up with this cell phone, smartphone in their hand, and they realize that they have unlimited access to endless amounts of pornography, and it's difficult. It's difficult to overcome that. You start to build a dependency on that whole situation. I had made a posting earlier this week that I think kind of summed up the thing. I was in a private chat, private DM with somebody, and I actually copied and pasted that right from my private DM. Where was it? Gotta find it. I was so happy with it, I decided to tweet it. Here it is. The neurological dependency is the problem. The porn was the agent that facilitates the dependency. Fapping is just a behavior that facilitates dopamine release. All of these things independently are just elements of the cocktail that, when mixed correctly, make a good addict. And so, the point of me saying that is to recognize that addiction is not the porn, right? And this is speaking to denial mechanisms when I say this, that the porn is not the dependency, right? The porn is just an agent. That's all it is. You think of it as like a widget, a thing. Just, it's a thing, right? Um, so you're engaging with this thing. If you just engage with a thing, that's not addiction either. It's not addiction either, right? Um, there has to be a pattern where you're constantly engaging with that thing, and the pattern has to escalate in a way in which it starts negatively impacting your life. And then we're starting to get closer to the definition of what addiction is. Um, talk about the process, right? The actual activities. So in your interaction with this thing and the pornography, um, there's behavior patterns that center around it. Those behavior patterns have to be present. So, in this case, masturbation, for example, masturbation facilitates the release of dopamine. Dopamine is the learning hormone, and through the release of dopamine, people think that, oh, it's the pleasurable side of things. Well, it's not the pleasure, believe it or not, that makes you the addict, right? It The release of dopamine is helps reinforce behavior patterns, and what it does is it works directly in another part of your brain. You're not working inside of the frontal lobes at that point. You're working in the basal ganglia. It's the lizard brain function, and so it's reinforcing the behaviors there, right? So it actively puts those behaviors in another area. It's a way of being able to retain information without using the memories inside of your frontal lobes. It retains information in another area of your brain, which is the habit formation aspects. So, for millions of years, that's helped other species on this planet, helped our earlier versions of ourselves. Um, you know, be, uh, Habits are necessary for survival. It's a survival mechanism. But by facilitating this process of looking at pornography, masturbating, exuding the dopamine release. We're now taking this habit forming mechanism that was typically used for other things like, um, you know, helping us. Helping us remember that when we get down to the river to drink the water, to look both ways, to make sure that there's not a cougar that's going to eat us, right? Um, knowing that the sweet tasting fruit that's on this particular tree it tastes good and it feels good, and I've got to remember that that thing exists on this tree. It creates a habit, a routine inside of our mind that helps our survival, right? um, and certainly for sex, right? Knowing that, when I find this attractive person and she meets all the criteria in my list, that she's oh, this feels good, and I want to keep repeating this activity, right? Survival mechanism. Then you're perpetuating the species. It's a good thing. Um, so speaking bluntly about this, like when we talk about the process with pornography, it's mimicking a survival process. Our need to procreate. It's mimicking a survival process, and it's embedding by using the dopamine release. Now, everything that's in our immediate environment, all those things that we call cues, right? Keyboard, monitor, where am I exactly? What am I listening to? What am I seeing? All of those things become burned in, become ingrained. And when you try removing any part of that, um, then that's when a craving kicks in because the routine is expected. It wants to keep going through that routine. And it wants the routine and the process in order that you put it in. So uh, we're manufacturing the environment that is necessary to imprint those behaviors. Manufacturing the environment that's necessary to imprint those behaviors on our mind. And in this case, it's all fake. Every single fucking bit of it. You know, those boobies don't exist on the TV. They're not real. Um, you're not by a river stream looking at a beautiful woman. You're in probably in some sort of dark room, right? You know, everything that you're doing, everything that you're seeing, the nature by which those boobies are being handed to you on a screen, all of it is fake. And yet it has power over you. And the reason why it has power over you is because we are replicating, we are producing all the situations needed in order to have that dopamine release. So you gotta fight it. You gotta fight it with every single ounce of your being. Let's talk about a couple of other things. I got some new news items, and I'll just want to roll through them real quick. Virginia's up next, man. If you haven't been paying attention, pretty soon you'll probably be going on Google and you won't get to see any boobies anymore. Like, if you try doing any sort of like Google search in your incognito tab, it's going to start to get harder and harder. And why is that? Because not only is Google starting to do the image blur, but they're also setting up state laws. Various states have already gone on. I think Louisiana's already there. Mississippi was I don't know if they actually signed their bill, but Virginia's up here. They're about ready to put the bill in front of the governor. So it started off in Europe, man, and it's going quick across the United States. Your state might be up next. So when this happens, what they're going to do is they're going to start making it more difficult for people who publish pornography online to just give free access. In other words, they're going to have to at least put an age restriction. Now, these states vary in how difficult they're going to make this, and no one's making it illegal outright. The states are actually taking the easier path. They're just saying, "Hey, you know what? We'll force the age restriction." Um, so, and it's probably the best way from a legal strategy to go about it because you know it's harder to outright ban things, but it's super easy to put an age restriction up there or force an age restriction. So that's the way they're all going with it. Um, yeah, man, I saw this article on the Guardian, and I hate sometimes posting from the Guardian, but they're talking about the demand for deep, deep fake pornography is exploding, and it's been talked about a lot in the last couple of months. It kind of we I just told you about how fake it is. Like those boobies don't really exist, but the creation of the marketing of those boobies, right, are somebody with a camera. in front of an actual woman, right? In this situation, we're moving more and more towards the virtualization of everything. And it's not just pornography. It's literally, if you look at almost any aspect of something that can be virtualized, there's going to be virtualized workers soon. We talk about, the GPT chat. It's, if you need a book report, give me a book report about, computer monitors and, sky, uh, sky clouds. I don't know, something like it'll come up with that. It'll actually formulate that book report. It'll make it happen. So the virtualization of all things is really starting to become a reality, and it's crazy to think about. But in context of pornography, I expect that this is the next evolution. Why? Because you look at the way things currently are. We started off when we had pornography 25 years ago online was mostly like you have like Playboy and all the other magazines of various degrees of um, exposure going on, right? But they were still, for the most part, I would say like most pornography early on in the internet was mostly just scans of like existing magazines and stuff like that. And then some of the publishers started working on getting their content directly online rather than going through the paper publishing because they saw the writing on the wall. And then that's when the space really started exploding, and then you started seeing, pornographers saying, "Well, hell, why do I make a VHS tape? I should just go directly online with this stuff." And so pornography as the actual mainstream industry, which was, producing VHS tapes, said, "We're gonna make this shift," and they slowly but surely started doing it. It started off with, like, the small time folks like making the jump and getting market share, and then the people were just like, oh shit, we're missing out on market share, so the large guys moved over and started making market share, right? And so again, all of that, you're talking about having to acquire talent, production people, directors, overhead camera operators, like all of that. Think about all of that stuff, right? Now, why do you think these guys are so motivated to do deepfake porn? Well, you don't have to hire a producer anymore. You don't have to have a director. You don't have to have a talent manager because talent no longer matters. It's like, let's make this girl have triple D's and you know, skinny, skinny waists and long legs, right? Put in the variables, bam, and you can just start doing whatever you want to, whatever you want to. And so deepfake, it started off by just taking, I'm going to take your face and put it on this other actress's body, right? That's the way it started off. And I think what's going to happen is that you're going to see the virtualization of everything because it makes sense. You're taking away all the parameters of everything else. And sooner or later, you're just going to see just nothing but all fake porn. Stop calling it deepfake at that point. It's gonna be artificial. Everything will be excuse me. Everything's gonna be artificial. So, that's on the horizon, man. And, deepfake right now is being, and correctly so, is being put on the, pedestal because we're talking about the legality of things, right? Is it good that Emma Watson has a deep fake out there? Of course it's not. It's not fair to Emma Watson that there's thousands of guys out there masturbating to her face being placed in somebody else's body. Um, that it's in and of itself not an ethical practice, right? But it's gonna go to another level, man. It's going to go to another level. We're just seeing the tip of the iceberg, and we're hearing the complaints by some actresses and things like people who are famous who don't want to be put in that situation. But pretty soon, the parameters by which we're seeing this, you know, actress facing somebody else's body, that that'll at some point be looked at as passe. That like it'll be completely a different thing. It'll be basically porn on demand. porn on demand, and you think you have porn on demand now, but you still have to go searching for it. Consider a time and place where you just think about what you want and it's there instantaneous or near instantaneous. It's going there. We're already starting to approach that. Anyway, you think that's going to make a new brand of addict? Hell yes, it is. Um, what else did I want to talk about? Oh, there's this person who's making this documentary on Pornhub, and she said, I didn't want to do a film that was sort of a WeWork story on Pornhub. She tells the Independent. Um, I wanted to figure out what stories were being missed, and so the idea is that she wanted to explore like the idea of like what's going to happen to sex workers as a result of the the shit that's going on Pornhub and like some of the other people. But the way I look at it is no, you should make the we work of Pornhub. The every single we work documentary that you say that, yeah, she's got a point that they all looked very similar, right? But the point was that WeWork started off as it was so hot, it was so over the top. Like you saw it everywhere. You saw people talking about it. They made it so trendy that everyone wanted to be part of it. And shit, Pornhub did the exact same thing, right? 10 years ago, no one was talking about Pornhub. Like it became a trend. And to their credit, they really knew how to market the crap out of their product. Um, but think about it for a second. Like WeWork fell apart because behind the front of that business and their relative success of being able to expand, was a really shitty business model ran by a really shitty human being. Um, this was a guy who was just, lying through his teeth, who was faking it till he made it. But the problem is that he made it, but it didn't make him a good businessman, right? And so what they discovered was that the valuation of this business, which was in the billions, did not match any sort of bottom line whatsoever. And so he was using really crappy business tactics to escalate his brand, which was a bunch of crap in the first place. And so all the money that was being thrown in his direction to kind of help him expand, all those investors thinking that they were investing in a good thing, it was all smoke and mirrors. And so Pornhub, it's an even worse story because not only was it all smoke and mirrors, and I say smoke and mirrors from a perspective that you can have all the mechanics of machinations of a good business plan in practice, right? It looks good from the outside, but behind the scenes, there was no real money that was being generated. That's what we mean by smoke and mirrors. And Pornhub was the same way, man. I mean, all the crap that I've read about over the last few years about what the way they practice business, absolutely terrible. To the credit, I wouldn't, I don't even want to call this a credit. They are a giant data aggregator. That's the Pornhub business model. They're giant data Pornhub. They show off, they flaunt their demographics. They flaunt it. So behind the scenes is one giant uh, monstrosity of a database, and this is how it works because I was in a similar line of business. This is how it works. They've got this giant monstrosity of a database. They're using these insane database engines for being able to pull out metrics that they can turn around and give to their advertisers and say, we can get you into this market, right? And you'll get X number of eyeballs, and that will, your advertisements will be seen by X number of eyeballs, and they can put demographics behind it to say you're more likely to consume this content if you are searching on X particular keyword. So that's what they're doing. They're just trying to set up the marketing parameters to be able to sell their advertising. And what had happened when, in the case of Pornhub, is that they talk about a shitty business. They were lying to their advertisers. Um, and there's been a few lawsuits that are out there. One of the one that I read was like really good about explaining how they were manipulating the data and basically lying to their advertisers. One of the things that strikes me about that whole thing was that, in any other, if you were in print media, for example, print media has had decades and decades and decades of dealing with fraud. And so they've actually employed third party auditors to look at the data to make sure that they're not being lied to. But Pornhub, for whatever reason, was getting away with it. There was no audit, man. So they would just lie to their advertisers, and the advertisers like, "Oh, sure," and kept throwing money at these guys. They're still throwing money at these guys. So anyway, this documentarian is saying, "Well, we don't want to look at it like we work. We'll focus on the smaller stories." It's like, dude, you got a giant dumpster fire. Focus on that. Like, educate the public on what this company is really about. And on top of all that, right, you have like the douchebaggery of like throwing rape videos and all those other things that had happened. Like they published all of that and sat on it for ages and didn't attempt to delete anything. As a father, it kind of gets me mad. It's like, Jesus, dude, what the fuck is wrong with you as a company? But that's the problem. That is exactly the problem. They're a dysfunctional company that they say they care about making money, but what these guys were really doing, it's almost a Ponzi-esque scheme, is that they were taking in lots of investor capital as a private organization. And so you're basically buying into a share or a piece of this company, but their revenues were not matching. If you were actually looking at the bottom lines, the revenues were not sustainable. They can't be sustainable. They hit their peak early. They made lots of early initial capital, but they can't sustain that. That's why they started going into cam services. And anyway, I won't get into the detailed machinations of what it was or what I see with Pornhub, but I predicted it early on that once this shit started hitting the fan, that they would immediately try to sell the company so that all the big heads can get out while they still can. That's a clear sign that it's very Enron-esque. No one wants to stick around for the ship to go down, so all the rats are going to leave the ship, and that's exactly what's happening. So as I talk about that as a porn addict, you have to come to the realization that you know what's driving your addiction. Obviously a lot of the things are you. It's like it's the internal problems that are doing this. But if you really need some excuses for getting the hell out of this, considering who your dealer is, like who's your supplier, man, these people are assholes. They don't give a shit about you. And so you're putting yourself into their content loop. It's like, all of a sudden you've got a supplier, and that supplier is a complete idiot, an asshole, doesn't care about either you or the consumer or the people that they monetize in order to deceive their investors into making, oh, we make money. No, you don't. um yeah, get the hell out of the cycle. Get out of that cycle. Anywho, that's all I got. I got about got a half an hour in, and I think I'm gonna just gonna kill it here. So, yeah, good news this week, and I'm gonna keep this ball rolling. If you haven't had the chance to do it already, like, share, subscribe. I don't make any, as you can see, there's no advertisements whatsoever on my channel. I do this to just work my 12 step, which is giving back to others. If you have any questions, you can always DM me on my Twitter space, and I try to actively pay attention to those DMs. You could also email me at road to recovery 11. It's ROAD number two recovery 11 at yahoo.com. And I try to check as often as I can. Obviously, some weeks I'm more busier than others, but I try to check it as often as I can. So, good luck to you. And if you have any problems, comments, concerns, let me know. I will talk to you later, and stay on that road to recovery. See you guys.